He is controversial, he's fearless, he's one of the biggest podcasters in Africa. But behind the laughs, the jokes, and the scandals lies a mastermind who turned podcasting into his personal empire. This is how Macg monopolized the podcasting industry. Hinda. Before he was the king of the podcast streets, Macg was just a kid on your TV. At just 13 years old, he joined Crazy E. That's right, the legendary ETV kids show from 2000 to 2005. He was the face of youthful energy and South African pop culture. But after Crazy E, the radio bug beat hard. He joined Joburg City Community Radio, sharpening his skills behind the mic. From there, he landed at YFM, one of the biggest youth stations in the country. But then things took a turn. In 2010, he was fired from YFN for making offensive remarks on air. A career-ending moment, maybe for some, but not for MacGyver. He bounced back, joining 947, one of South Africa's top radio stations, where he worked until 2018. But corporate radio had its limits, and Macg wanted control. He didn't like the censorship. So in July 2018, he took a risk that would change South African media forever. The birth of Podcast and Chill. In July 2018, Podcast and Chill with Macg was born. It started small, just Macg and his friend, Len Muleko, talking freely, cracking jokes, and interviewing guests. There was no big budget, no fancy studio, just raw conversation and chemistry. Slowly, the show started gaining traction. The people loved the authenticity, but as the podcast grew, so did the pressure. The money wasn't matching the fame. By late 2020, they had around 90,000 subscribers. But behind the scenes, things were shaky. In November 2020, Len decided to leave. He wanted to explore other ventures and protect his friendship with Macg. That same month, Sol Penduka joined the show and the chemistry clicked instantly. That moment marked a new era for the Podcast and Chill network. Now that the main show was booming, Macg had a new goal: dominate the podcasting space. In 2021, he started launching multiple spin-offs under the Podcast and Chill network. On the Table in March 2021, After Chillers in May 2021, Podcast and Ride in August 2021, City Girls in November 2021. It was an ambitious move, his first attempt at monopolizing the podcasting industry. Even though these side shows didn't really blow up, getting low views compared to the main show, they showed Macg's mindset. He wasn't just building a podcast, he was building an empire. While smaller podcasts were trying to rise, Macg was already planting his flag across the board. Fast forward to 2023, the year Macg hit 1 million subscribers on YouTube. By now, he wasn't just a podcaster, he was a media powerhouse. But he wasn't stopping there. In March 2023, he launched Popcorn and Cheese, a comedy show featuring Robot Boy and Pop-Pops. The chemistry, the jokes, the chaos, it worked. The show quickly became a hit. However, after Robot Boy's controversy, the show rebranded in 2024 as PNC, standing for People Need Comedy, now with Farida and Titi. Still running, still strong, but comedy wasn't enough for Macg. In July 2023, he launched Spreading Humors, a show made for the youth, hosted by 3 young influencers, Yanda Woods, Zile Wheezy, and Sima. They're discussing what's trending among the new generation. And just a few months later, in August 2024, he launched Piano Pulse, a music show centered on amapiano and the local music scene. Piece by piece, Macg was building a network of shows targeting every major audience segment: comedy, youth, music, culture. It was no longer just Podcast and Chill, it was a full-blown network. In April 2023, Len Muleko made his surprise return to the network with a soccer show called Onside ZA. It aimed to blend football analysis with the chiller vibe, but unfortunately the numbers weren't great. They were not doing views. By January 2025, Onside ZA was shut down and rebranded the next month in February 2025 as the Banter League, this time with new hosts and without Len Muleko. Even though it didn't work, it showed that Macg wasn't afraid to experiment and pivot fast. Now, what's a monopoly without competition? Enter Open Chats, a podcast that actually started back in 2020 with only Mto and Sino being added later on. But it didn't really make noise until May 2023 when it suddenly blew up. And just 2 months later, in July 2023, Macg launched Spreading Humors. Coincidence? I don't think so. It was clearly a strategic counter move. A youth-focused podcast aimed directly at the same audience as Open Chats. And guess what? It worked. Spreading Humors became one of the biggest youth podcasts in the country, directly competing with Open Chats. Since then, the two shows have been throwing subtle and sometimes not so subtle shots at each other. The rival is real. Now let's talk about the next major rival, El Tido. The retired rapper turned podcaster entered the scene in November 2022 with the El Tido podcast. El Tido had one big advantage over Macg. He had access to celebrities who didn't like Macg, people like Casper Nyovest, Minnie Dlamini, and others. All the stars who refused to go on podcast and chill were now going to El Tido's show. This created tension between the two, a subtle online cold war, but El Tido didn't stop there. He expanded his network in 2025, launching the New Gen podcast featuring Domingos, Bruce, Hotshot Aaron, Sieve, and Fargo. Now, here's where it gets interesting. One of the hosts, Hotshot Aaron, is a streamer and a YouTuber. Macg, being the strategist he is, he offered Aaron a sponsorship from his own brand, Chiller's Punch. Sounds innocent, right? Not exactly. That move caused tension within El Tido's camp. Aaron worked under the El Tido network. How could he do this? And now he was being sponsored by their rival. Eventually, Aaron left El Tido podcast and even unfollowed it on social media. And just like that, Macg didn't just compete, he weakened his opponent's team, as Aaron has one of the biggest followings in all of the co-hosts of the podcast. That's not just business, that's monopoly, warfare. Looking at it all, the spin-offs, the rivalries, the sponsorships, one thing becomes clear: Macg isn't just podcasting, he's strategically controlling the space. From podcast and chill to PNC, from spreading humors to piano pals, he's made sure that whatever genre you're into, there's a Macg show for you. Even when his competitors rise, he counters them with new shows, new hosts, and even smart business plays like sponsorships. Love him or hate him, you can't deny it. Macg has successfully monopolized the South African podcasting industry. So whether you call him a genius or a villain, Macg's journey from a 13-year-old on Crazy E to the head of a podcasting empire is nothing short of legendary. And as the South African podcast scene keeps growing, one thing's for sure: Macg will always find a way to stay on top. This was how Macg monopolized the podcasting industry. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.